We see you coming into our space, and we're so fortunate to have you joining us this evening. Um, we're going to give a few minutes for more participants to come in. Um, but already I see many friends and colleagues and people I've read and those I'm very happy to be with during this evening. So we'll give this another minute or two. And then we will begin our rounds. And by now, you must know one another too, because this session does tend to bring in a community of persons, either who have been involved in narrative medicine or have been following us in other ways, or just who love great writing, which you will have this evening with Binnie Kirshenbaum and her moderator, um, um, Callie, I'm sorry, Carly Hoffman. So between the two of them, it's an evening of really elevated language and deep, deep conversation about illnesses and living through them as a patient or a family. So how are we doing with time? Are people still coming in?
We can start.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I'm Rita Sharon. I'm in the Division of Narrative Medicine and in the Department of Medical Humanities and Ethics at Columbia University in the medical school. And I'm going to begin. I've already welcomed you to rounds this evening, but I'm also going to say that you guys are troopers because the last two rounds had to be either postponed or well, both postponed for different reasons. As you recall, 2 months ago, a serious family emergency struck our speaker literally 10 minutes before the rounds were about to begin, and we just had to very precipitously cancel it. And then the second, which was last time, had to do with Columbia University and its policies that interfered with our capacity to continue the rounds. So I'm grateful that
medicine course?
No, no. Every month they have an evening.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, who's that? What? We heard some conversation. We're okay. So let me just welcome all of you. Many of you know what narrative medicine is, but very briefly, if some of you don't, it's a means by which persons who care for patients are able to develop their own capacity to hear what they say, to comprehend what it is that patients, families, communities are going through, whether they're healthy and trying to stay healthy, or ill and trying to get better, or severely ill and facing the ends of their lives. And it was through the introduction of thinking and doing and creative skills from the humanities, from literary studies, from philosophy, from social sciences as well, from visual arts, that we discovered a means to open up the clinician, the doctor, the nurse, the social worker, the pharmacist, the dentist, to open up that caregiver, to be able to absorb what it is that a patient or family is literally trying to say. And we were rather aghast that so many of our colleagues within the clinical sciences, I'm a general internist, so uh, um, many of our colleagues just didn't have the radar to be able to capture and comprehend and translate what it was that they were hearing from patients. And this was now 20 years ago that we began this effort. And by now it's way beyond Colombia, nationally, internationally, um, and has helped to even popularize other forms of narrative work, storytelling, efforts to expand, deepen, and singularize the story that every patient tells. So with that, let me begin our evening. You know that we'll be hearing Binnie Kirshenbaum, who is the professor of fiction at Columbia. And I hope you understand that phrase, professor of fiction, as both a writer of fiction and a believer in fiction. Um, and she will be reading from and talking about two of her recent novels. And our moderator is Carly Hoffman, who is a poet, who is, I think, a metaphysical poet from what I've read of her. Her two recent books are called When There Was Light, and the second recent book is One More World Like This World. So we are about to enter a room of care, a room of fiction, which comes very close to and is inspired by and forced onto the consciousness of the professor of fiction. So I will invite Carly Hoffman to come now and continue our evening. Thank you all so, so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you, Rita. That was such a beautiful introduction, bringing us into the space. I already feel inspired. Good evening. I'm Carly Hoffman, and I'll be your host this evening at Narrative Medicine Rounds. I'd like to first acknowledge that we are hosting tonight from Manhattan, part of the unceded ancestral land of the Lenni, Lenape, and Wappinger people. A couple brief reminders before I introduce our author to ensure the program goes smoothly. Please keep your microphone muted to cut down on background noise during the program. Be forewarned that if there are any disruptions or inappropriate activity, you may be removed from the event. During the talk, we ask people to keep chat interactions to a minimum. As we get closer to the Q&A part of the event, we'll invite you to submit questions via the chat for our speaker, but before then, we won't be monitoring questions. So please save your questions to type into the chat after we make the announcement. Welcome to Disturbances of the Mind, depictions of neurological and psychological illnesses in Binnie Kirshenbaum's most recent two novels, Rabbits for Food, published in 2019, and Counting Backwards, which I have a copy. It was just released earlier this year. Kirshenbaum is one of our most incisive chroniclers of the human psyche, unflinching, funny, insightful, and profoundly humane. Publishers Weekly declared both novels a tour de force, and in this year's roundup of their best books, they wrote that Kirshenbaum, with this novel and its marvelous predecessor, Rabbits for Food, has established herself as one of the finest contemporary writers of illness. In Rabbits for Food, Kirshenbaum gave us a sardonic, self-aware New York woman who, after a psychological breakdown on New Year's Eve, checks into a psychiatric hospital. Rabbits for Food was commended for its insight into psychological illness with searing humor and empathy. The Atlantic praised Kirshenbaum's expert ability at balancing a restrained narrative while revealing a more complete and sometimes contradictory picture of a woman who's struggling to rationalize what's happened to her. Her newest novel, Counting Backwards, turns that same unrelenting gaze toward neurological illness. It follows Addie, a collage artist, and her husband Leo, a research scientist, as they navigate his early-onset Lewy body dementia. The New York Times called the novel To Illness Narratives What Yellow Is to the Rainbow. Its beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This one couldn't look away, and didn't want to. The Washington Post described Counting Backwards as far and away Kirshenbaum's bleakest book, the feel-bad novel of the year. Yet she has not lost her knack for pitch black comedy. While Booklist praised it as a literary collage of exquisite sensitivity and artistry. We'll talk tonight about the intersections between psychological and neurological illness, the role of comedy in tragedy, narrative voice, what it means to depict the mind in dysfunction, and Kirshenbaum's unparalleled ability to turn suffering into art. And before we begin our discussion, Kirshenbaum will treat us to short readings from both Rabbits for Food and Counting Backwards.
Hello. I'm going to read from the beginnings of both books, and just the chapters are quite short, but I've excised them anyway for sake of time. But I think it can still follow in a way that doesn't cause any question. I just took out a lot of things that happen in the middle of these chapters. I also title all my chapters, and so this one is called. This is from Rabbits for Food, and the title is Waiting for the Dog. The dog is late, and I'm wearing pajamas made from the same material as handy wipes, which is reason enough for me to wish I were dead. On the opposite wall from where I sit is the schedule of activities board. Next to the board is a clock, one of those schoolroom type clocks, which moves time as if through sludge. That's it. There's nothing else to look at other than the blue slipper socks on my feet. It doesn't take long to grow bored by my slipper socks, and I turn my attention back to the clock. When one of the nurses, the tall one, tall and skinny, gangly, not graceful, Ella, her name is Ella, walks by, and then as if she'd forgotten something, she pauses, pivots, and retraces her steps. Mind if I join you, she asks. To sit on the bench, Ella has to fold herself as if her arms and legs were laundry. You know what, hon? I don't think the dog is coming today. Ella calls everyone hun. I'm not special, which is one of the things that about kills me from the hurt of it, that I'm not special. And worse than the hurt of not being someone special is the shame of it, the shame of how much I want that, to be someone special. It didn't come on Monday either, I say. And the sorrow I experience about the dog not showing up is way out of proportion to the fact of it. But that is why I'm here, isn't it? Because the sorrow I feel about everything is bigger than the thing itself. Ella suggests that we give up on the dog for now, that I join some other activity. So what do you think, hon? How about arts and crafts? On Monday, when the dog didn't show up, I went to arts and crafts, where we glued mosaic tiles to a square piece of wood to make the exact same whatever the fuck it was that I made in arts and crafts class in the 3rd grade. Even in the 3rd grade, I knew that this was something only a demented person would want. As if there's something she overlooked, Ella concentrates on the activity boards. But she has overlooked nothing. She knows what choices remain: creative writing or jigsaw puzzles. Granted, I am clinically depressed, but I'm not that depressed, so low as to go with jigsaw puzzles. And creative writing? You've got to be kidding me. And from Counting Backwards, it's actually the 2nd chapter, but the 1st chapter is kind of circles back to the end, so I'm not going to read that one. And this one is called, Do You See What I See? Leo is at the living room window, the curtain pulled to one side, and he's peering out like the nosy neighbor trolling for dogs peeing on flower beds, or clandestine affairs. Come here a second, would you, he says. What? Who is it now, you ask? Under the light, Leo says, you don't see Gandhi? Gandhi? Leo sees Mahatma Gandhi stirring lentils in a pot, an iron pot that hangs from a tripod. You don't see Gandhi. Is he wearing anything more than a dhoti? If that's all he has on, he must be freezing. You might want to bring him a coat. Because Leo realizes perfectly well that he is hallucinating, that Gandhi is not out there on the sidewalk stirring lentils in a pot, you feel free to add, you might want to give him a pair of thick socks too. I'm assuming he's barefoot. The hallucinations occur only sporadically, 1 per week, 2 tops, but Leo has been keeping track of them, dates and times on a sheet of graph paper, and in a small spiral-bound notebook, he writes the narrative descriptions in pencil. It's uncharacteristic of him not to document his notes on the computer, and his preference for using pencil and not a pen is equally baffling because of how, over time, pencil fades and how easily it is erased. People who see ghosts tend to see the same ghost wafting down the same staircase, but none of the characters populating Leo's wacko hallucinations have returned for a repeat performance. However, a distinct pattern has emerged. These ornate, vividly articulated visions, like the earlier halos and angels, are seen exclusively from your living room window, and they occur between 9 and 11 at night, with 2 exceptions. The cauldron of bats emerged from a cave and flew en masse up to the moon at 8:32, and it was close to midnight when the troupe of actors arrived, smack in the middle of the street, illuminated by street lamps like torches in an amphitheater, treating Leo to a snippet of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Act 4, Scene 1, Titania, Bottom, and the whole slew of fairies. The following night, you called Leo to the window. Look, it's Hitler and Leni Riefenstahl. They're making a movie. I'm not amused, he said, but he was amused, and you laughed as if these hallucinations were nothing but one more example of Leo's personality peculiarities. Like that time he came home with 11 different kinds of salt, Himalayan pink, black lava, Alaskan flake, and who knows what else. They all tasted the same. They all tasted like salt. Nonetheless, you have to wonder how, from a 6th-floor window down to the street, was he able to see the lentils in Gandhi's pot. Okay. Done with the reading.
Oh, Binnie, thank you so much. That's wonderful. I'm just trying to, oh, perfect. Thank you to whoever did that. Awesome. So let's get into it. How did the ideas for rabbits for food and counting backwards first come to you? Did either or both emerge from personal experience or artistic imagination, or both?
Both of them sprung from personal experience and observations, but it's kind of like the way a tree grows from an acorn. So I started with that, but then as soon as I start writing, my imagination takes over. And I have to, and the characters become other people, not me, not the people I know. And I invent events that, in order to create both, plot or tension for turn, because I'm not that heavy on plot, actually, or tension. And then the invention of the incidents that I'll invent come to illuminate and then reveal character. It's how do these people behave in these particular circumstances? Though my books decidedly are not memoir, they are realistic fiction, and so they have to read like they're true to life. And so that requires a lot of research on my part, which I love doing. And the research sort of acts as a prompt, or it is an impetus then for the events that happen. And for these books, the research really did inspire the critical plot points and the turns of events that happen, and in which case then character development also starts to get revealed and come to know these people better and better by what happens. In the ECT and Rabbits for Food was all done through research. And in Counting Backwards, things like there's a moment of violence where Leo, the husband, gets violent, and or another one where he's sexually inappropriate. Things that didn't happen, but learning that these things often happen with people of Lewy body proved to be really crucial to the way the book moves along.
Talk a little bit more about your characters, because I always find when I read your work, they feel so real to me because they don't come across as ideal versions of anybody. There's very
No, they're not.
in Rabbit in Rabbits for Food, the main character, the protagonist, she's witty and she's sarcastic and she has a lot of rage and self-absorption and also dark humor. And in Counting Backwards, similarly, along with the sorrow and despair that Addie feels about what is happening to Leo, she sort of reacts to her husband's illness with this self-pity, but also selfishness and guilt. And there's an anger that's directed towards Leo, but also at the healthcare system and the world around. And so this is to say that your characters, main and supporting, are intentionally flawed and far from idealized, with qualities that might surprise and disturb your readers. Could you speak to the role of such complex, imperfect characters in fiction, especially in stories dealing with intimate mental illness or disease?
Well, I do think that the point of literature is not to feel good when you're done reading it, but rather to explore the human condition. And the fact is, nobody is perfect, even the nicest people in the world. We're all flawed, and in certain circumstances, the flaws will be exacerbated or come to the surface, and people will behave less than admirably, even when they're otherwise decent people. And we have to be true to who they are as characters and also to the way people are. And like in Rabbits for Food, the husband is really fundamentally a very good guy, and he's understanding and he's patient and he's helpful and he truly loves his wife. But during this time, he's also having an affair. And sometimes people will sort of make comments about, not liking him because of that. Well, first, I don't care if you like them or not. That's not the point. But also, like I said, people are not perfect. No one is perfect. And so I'm interested in discovering what it is about their failures that makes them human, more so than sort of the niceties that make us nice, but not necessarily rich characters. And in Counting Backwards, the circumstances of what's happening really bring out the worst in the wife. I mean, she's faced with this horrible disease, and in this case, it's very early onset Lewy body, so it's unexpected, and this is not part of her future plans with her husband and her life. And so she doesn't always behave well. She thinks really nasty and horrible things. She says really nasty and horrible things. But I don't think that literature is meant to be any kind of a moral or ethical guidebook. It's not, I at least don't read to be inspired or to learn how to be a better person. I learn to understand people. I read to understand. And the flaws and failures of human beings just interest me more, not just as a writer, but as a reader too. And I just find it much more interesting to create characters that aren't likable or that they're reprehensible or they're difficult. I just find them more compelling. If any of my students are here, they might have heard me say when I talk about this in classes that if you go to a party and you meet somebody who's just truly lovely and you come home and say, oh, I just met the nicest person, nobody really cares. They're not interested. But if you say, oh my God, I met this woman and she was so rude and nasty, everybody leans in. They want to hear, what did she say? What did she do? And so I think that it's just that the flaws and failures make the work richer, and I think, ultimately more interesting.
So that's such a great answer. Thank you. And I'm thinking about, so the point of view of in counting backwards, it's in the second person. And for those of you who read and write fiction, that can be a bit challenging to sustain a story with you as the point of view. But while Leo in Counting Backwards is the character with the Lewy body disease, the novel fundamentally centers on Addie's experience, especially through the narration, which is told in second person. And Kirkus Reviews lauded your use of the second person as so seamless, it's easy to forget about it completely. As a reader, you simply hop into Addie's shoes and carry on. What did you hope to illuminate or achieve by choosing to write Addie's perspective in the second person? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how this narrative choice might shape readers' connection to her experience.
Well, when I first started writing it, I wasn't even thinking about it, and I wrote in just writing it in second person, and being aware that can be problematic, not just difficult, but it can be off-putting. Sometimes a reader will think, what do you mean you? That's not me. So when you're talking to somebody and you say, well, you went to the store, and say, no, I didn't, or it can create a real distance. And, people will know, well, who is this you person? I don't know who this is. But so when I was thinking about that, I thought, well, let me try something else. And I tried it in third person, and somehow it just felt kind of flat. And then I tried it in first person, and it started to feel very cloying and overly sentimental or melodramatic, and I certainly didn't want that. So I went back to writing in second person and felt just very comfortable with that book. And because I did want her to have a kind of distance, and I sort of felt even for the reader, the distance was necessary. But when I told my editor that I was working in second person, he went dead silent. It was like 2 minutes on the phone of nothing. And so I said, well, let me send you what I've got and see what you think. And I did. And he called back and was really happy with it and said that it was the right choice. So I stuck with it.
You've often balanced humor with despair in your work. How do you find that tonal balance when writing about serious illness?
Well, I think everything I write is on the dark side anyway, and I'm always interested in all kinds of suffering and despair and grief and things like that. But I also firmly believe that tragedy and comedy are intertwined, and that, it's either two sides of one coin. I once heard someone say something about that tragedy plus time equals comedy. But I think in order for us to survive with all the personal tragedies that we face, but also the tragedies in the world around us, if we can't find the humor, we just wouldn't be able to get out of bed. And so we look for what's absurd as a way of comforting ourselves in a way. Think about the times that we're in now, and, stand-up comics will get up and suddenly we're laughing about things that are happening that are terrible because they point out the absurdities to them. And so I feel it is like that. And, if just, recently, like, watching those ice raids and then seeing the man in the frog suit confronting them that was funny, And I also believe in being very, very honest. And I think that sometimes people are startled by that, but I almost look at it like when little children say something that because they're unfiltered and it's funny, even though it's rude or it's inappropriate or, and so I feel that my characters do that and that they become unfiltered, and with the unfiltering and letting go of the sort of societal norms and how we're supposed to talk about things or what we're supposed to say or the polite thing to say. If I take those things out and let them just say what they're actually thinking or feeling, then the humor just arises from it, sort of inevitable for me.
I remember when I was reading Counting Backwards and I wrote to you in the middle and I'm like, I'm so sad. I feel so like heartbroken for this couple, but I can't stop laughing. And then it made me care about them even more as a reader.
Well, I think again, it adds to a complexity to them. And when they become real people and not just one-dimensional, we ultimately do care more.
Were there moments in writing Counting Backwards that surprised you emotionally or forced you to reconsider what you thought you knew about loss?
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, and I had this spate of like 5 years where I really lost everybody who I was closest to. And maybe because I didn't get a chance to recover from one before the next loss came. And so I don't know if I really sort of pondered that in a way that I would have had it been just, one person and then some years go by to absorb it. But while I was writing this, because, so much of it, and the vast majority is invented, maybe the subconscious opens up in some way or other. And, there were a couple of scenes that while writing them forced me to contemplate what it means to lose somebody. And one being in Counting Backwards, when she confronts for herself that there's the lack of intimacy with her husband, that, both physical intimacy, there will be no more sex. And, they had a happy marriage and that was pretty good. And then realizing that's never going to happen again. And so that, that was one thing that I think, made me think about that kind of loss, that I hadn't thought about it in that way. And then the intimacy of, these are the people that I could tell certain things to that I wouldn't tell anybody else. And so that kind of intimacy was also taken away. But the one that really kind of surprised me the most, which was something that I've never considered, well, sort of did in a different way, was there's a chapter in the book where she imagines taking him to be euthanized. And because there's no, as she's looking at, there's no quality of life here. And while I have personally had to euthanize pets and know how hard that has been, but I'm also knowing I'm doing the right thing because they're suffering and there's no hope that they're going to get better, and don't want them to suffer it. But in the book, Leo is not suffering. I mean, once he's regressed, he doesn't know what happened and he's perfectly happy. And she's the one who's miserable. So when she, in this chapter, imagining and in great detail, taking him, realizing that it was to alleviate her suffering and not his, and that she just can't bear this anymore. And this was her way out. And that was sort of startling and kind of alarming to me, and gave me a lot to think about.
At this moment, I just wanted to open up questions from the audience. I imagine people are very eager to ask some questions, so you can drop those in the chat. And while they're doing that, if Binnie, maybe you could share a little bit about maybe what you're working on next, or where are you going from here? Because the book did just come out. So.
Well, it did just come out, but between the time that you finish a book and it comes out is over a year, usually. And during that time, busy with, your editor gives you a note back, copy editor comes back, proofreaders come back. So I'm still really immersed in it, despite the fact that my work is essentially done. And then once it does come out, then there's all this flurry of publicity stuff, giving readings and doing things like this and interviews. And so, that's another 6 months or so. So I actually haven't written anything at all in over, a year and a half or more. And after decompressing for a little bit, I just started to get back to work and decided that although I had written one story collection, it was a very long time ago. And since then, I've done nothing but novels. And I realized I was a little exhausted by them. First, they take really a long time to write, or at least for me, they take a long time. So I didn't want to sort of spend another 5, 10 years, whatever, immersed in something with no satisfaction of seeing it done yet. And just the sheer volume of pages. I am always moving things around when I write. Chapter 1 becomes chapter 7, and the ending becomes the beginning, and so I just decided I wanted to keep it more compact, and wish I could write poetry, but I can't. So sometimes I thought, I'll write flash fiction, but as it turns out, I can't be that brief. So anyway, I've turned back to writing some stories and just completed one partway into another. So see what happens. See how many more of them come. I don't know.
I love your short stories. I'm excited about if you make another short story collection.
We'll see if I can get that many out. But
we have a question here from Ellen P. In your research, did you interview doctors or families of or even patients with mental illness or dementia, etc., assuming they were aware enough to comment? Or did you spend any time observing people with these diseases or issues? And if so, did that feel appropriate considering the stigmas they face? That's a good question.
Well, first, my own personal experience with it with my husband, but sounds strange to say luckily he died, because it wasn't lucky that this happened. But after doing research and seeing how it progresses, and then how awful that can be, I was kind of grateful that he died before it got really, really bad. So I did have that. I didn't talk to anybody in really, except one woman I know whose father had Lewy body dementia, and I had spoken with her for quite a while about it, but otherwise it was all the research and came from that for the most part.
And A.K. Anderson has asked, could you speak to your view of editors' comments and feedback? Are you naturally open to them, sometimes resistant? Is there an example of where you knew your choices were right and the editor's feedback off base, or an example of where the editor's comments led to your work being improved?
Well, I think I have a good editor. I mean, honestly, usually when I hand something in, I've worked on it so long and so hard that there isn't much editing input from the editor. I only once, a long time ago, did I have an editor, not the one that I'm with now, who made a suggestion that I thought was really dreadful. And it was the ending. So I really was not going to change it. I was adamant about that. But and smaller things, if sometimes they'll want a little bit more, something expanded. I might have been too brief or too quick about it. Sometimes some cuts, and I'm always open to that. I mean, that's what they're there for, and you want to have the best book you can possibly have. So I think it's a mistake to shut down and just say, no, what I've done is perfect. I'm not touching a precious word. But you also sort of have to understand and figure out when they're right and when they're not. because ultimately it is your book.
We have another question here by Ava Cronus. Have you ever felt that America has become one of your characters between humor and despair aspect?
I'm sorry, has what become?
I'm not sure. Have you ever felt that America has become one of your characters? I think this speaks to like when you were discussing like humor and despair.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, certainly lived despair. I think because my other books, for the most part, although I do weave commentaries about the state of our world throughout, it's certainly not the focus of anything. But, you know, I do make references to things that exacerbate the despair, make it, compound it, you know, whether in both books, whether it's the medical community and sometimes in how they're dealing or not dealing with things and how difficult navigating, you know, the medical system in America is, the comments on who might be president and the characters' responses to that. But it's interesting because now that I've decided to, or I'm trying to do these stories, I have been thinking more along those lines about making them more political because I've been obsessed.
Question from Carmen from Portugal. Portugal is in the house tonight. Did you write while you were dealing with the disease, or I mean, well, dealing with thinking about the disease, I guess, or was it a long time after? So I guess like how much time between like your experiences in life with illness and then the reflective period and then writing the books?
Well, with Rabbits for Food, I'm always depressed, so you know, that was sort of, you know, during or whatever. With Counting Backwards, wasn't until a while after my husband died that I actually started trying, and it was during COVID, so you know, had to do something. But during the time that he was ill, I was talking with a friend, and recounting an incident, and he said to me, well, you know, you just have to write that down. And so I did, and I wrote a couple of other things down that I wanted to remember that had happened. And then when I thought that, you know, going to be alone in the house for quite a while and wanted to write something, I went to the notebook where I had written those things down and sort of just wanted to see what I could do with it.
Let's see. We have a question about the writing process, if you would mind talking about it. Elizabeth Kelly has asked just basically how do you write? When do you write? I would also like to add to it, since it seems there are writers here tonight, if you have any advice that either you've been given that's something that stayed with you over time, or any advice to these folks who are writing narratively.
Yeah, I mean, my process is that I write when I get up. Unfortunately, I have insomnia, so sometimes that's not till 2 p.m. But you know, make my coffee, sit down, and work until I feel like I have nothing else to say right now, and then I stop and do whatever else. And I try to write every day, or at least 5 days a week, because it's my job, and you go to your job most every day. And usually what I do is I write a first draft of something all the way through, and it's an absolute mess, and I would never show it to anybody ever. And my process is maybe more arduous than most, because after I write that first draft, it's dreadful. I print it out and I read it, and I by hand make notes in the margins and whatnot. And then I start a brand new file, and I put that first draft off to the side and refer to it like the detailed notes. And what I find really interesting is that when I then am doing the second draft, how much more comes that wasn't there in the first place. Characters will appear that weren't there before. It's like almost starting from scratch in a way. And then I repeat this process of printing it out, making notes, starting a brand new file, and then doing it again. And depending, sometimes I do that 4 or 5 times, sometimes 10 times. A lot of trial and error with the form of things. Rabbits for Food is broken into 2 parts, and one is centered around the day she has the breakdown, and then the second part is when she's in the hospital. And so I think about that a lot. And then the last thing I do that I am most compulsive about is line editing and fixing my sentences and making them as good as they can be, considering my word choices. Is there a better word than the one that I've used? Is there another way to say this? And tightening it up and sort of aiming to make the sentences sparkle. And that can take a while. But that's kind of my favorite part, because the anxiety of having it's written, and so the fear of not being able to actually write it is gone. So now it's just sort of the polishing, which I think really does bring out so much when you do that, and that the sharpness of the sentences also then reveal character much more, because you've made things precise.
So a couple of people have pointed this out in the chat, and it actually is with a question I put aside. Just sort of around the ethics around writing about illness, because you're writing fiction, it's not a memoir. So I think maybe if you could speak to the distinction of that and sort of anything you want to share.
Well, I don't consider the ethics of it. Because as I said earlier, that I don't think literature is about that. I think if we want to learn how to, say, be a caregiver, this isn't the book for that. I have nothing to say. And with Rabbits for Food, I think that there's no right or wrong way to have the breakdown, and there's no right or wrong way to deal with any illness, except that you do the best that you can, but the best that you can is often not good. So I don't consider that, because I don't think that that's what literature is about. So I think, other than being as accurate to the facts as I can possibly be, I wouldn't make up treatments that don't exist or things like that, or so I don't feel that there's ethics. And I certainly never ever would want to hurt anybody, and what I write is very different from who I am. But I do aim for this sort of the honesty of human nature, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Great. Thank you so much. If there are no more questions, I think Binnie, I think we'll just end here. I think that's a great place to end on humanity. And thank you everyone for being here. And Binnie, it was just a delight to talk to you about both of your books.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. I don't know who's here exactly, but those of you who are, that it's much appreciated. Look at all those nice hearts.
Zoom is it's so high tech now. They're making changes every day. Um,
I know, I never saw those before. Of course, maybe no one ever gave me those before.
Me neither. Oh, I see it. Oh, there's some familiar names. Just to close out, thank you for joining us tonight. And a recording of this evening's event will be shared later this week via email with all registered attendees. We hope you'll join us again next month on December 3rd when we welcome Antoinette Cooper, visionary writer, TEDx speaker, collective trauma facilitator, and founder of Black Exhale, who will speak about her debut book of poetry, Unruly. Additionally, we're excited to announce that we have rescheduled our event with national bestselling author Lydia Yuknovich for December 10th. She'll discuss her newest memoir, Reading the Waves. Thank you so much, Binnie.
Oh, thank you all very much.